Good afternoon, Nerd Fam, and welcome back to Barcelona, Spain. We're here coming to the conclusion of day one of our 4 days of coverage on theCUBE. My name's Savannah Peterson, joined with Dave Vellante. Dave, what is the coolest thing you've learned?
Day one. I feel like the week is ending. Holy cow.
Well, we've had enough great content today
yes,
that I feel like we could have gotten a whole scope of the show in just the short time we've been here, although so many fun stories to unpack, including with our next guest. Shahid, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I mean, you were hosting Dave last night at happy hour, now you're here with us. We're going to be talking small language models, we're going to be talking Edge. There's a whole lot going on.
That's a good tradition you guys do on the Verbena rooftop.
Yeah, Sunday evening, right before the show begins.
It's become a sort of a classic meeting spot now. It was a good crowd last night.
That's all, and it didn't rain, so we like that.
Rain,
I was thinking about that with your rooftop. That was I respect the courage that it took to do that. What's the most exciting thing you've seen here on day one?
You know, it does feel like day four, by the way, so I kind of agree with you. Well, first and foremost, it feels like we got more people than last year.
It feels super buzzy.
I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but hard to get through from hall 5 to 6 to 4. So I have a sense that there's more people. We'll get the numbers later from John Hoffman, CEO of GSMA, but it feels like the buzz is here around AI, the buzz around Europe versus US, regulate versus innovate. That debate is boiling. I was in a panel where they're talking about the role of regulations and how to fair share for telcos. My message was, go innovate, guys. No one's stopping you to building those over-the-top applications. So, look, I think there's a lot to talk about. I'm very excited about the show.
So, by inference, where are you on regulation, regulatory capture? You're like on the innovation side of the equation, right? Is that right? Am I inferring correctly?
100%. I think, look, as the adage goes, Europe regulates, US innovates. I think that continues to happen. I think US has taken the lead on AI, clearly. Of course, there's China there too. We've seen that story play out last 6 weeks. So we cannot ignore that. But in the end, I think the whole model around innovation and creating new opportunities, startups, Silicon Valley, you guys are very familiar with it.
Indeed.
I think that's definitely helping these new waves of technologies that we're beginning to see and happen every other week.
So as we talked about earlier, 2 years ago, the CUBE research put out, actually 2.5 years now, the CUBE Gen AI Power Law. And there we said, okay, you're going to have a lot of big LLMs, big players, but there's going to be a huge opportunity for smaller language models that are sovereign, more secure, bringing data, AI to the data on-prem and at the edge. You've been talking about this for about the same amount of time. We've seen that, we predicted it, it's now happening, isn't it?
It's awesome that you guys have been talking well before DeepSeek showed up to the scene. It became a family word. I think, look, for me, anybody can build a large language model. You got deep pockets, you can get the GPUs, you can build it. It's not a big deal. Big deal is to build a small language model.
Why?
Because 3 big reasons. One, you don't want to be consumed with large resources of compute power, which means
100%.
Not only it's not sustainable, it's power hungry, and it's not economical. Almost 80% of the use cases, as an example, in industrial manufacturing plants are based on edge use cases.
80%?
80% of AI use cases are on the edge, right? And so you intuitively think about it, right?
Yeah.
How many people in blue collar workers are going to actually use ChatGPT, Perplexity, Anthropic on their laptop? Few.
No, it's AI beyond the browser.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you want to automate all your conveyor belts, your thermostats, your robotics, that requires a very edge type service. It requires smaller language models. I'm only talking about 20 tokens, 30, 40 tokens.
Whole different experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, to me, that's where the breakthroughs are going to happen. And I'm so glad that DeepSeek, one of the side benefits of DeepSeek besides bringing the whole economics down, is to bring to this idea that you don't need large language models.
Correct.
You can do, you can garner the benefits of AI from small models that can go on your cell phone.
100%.
A little Raspberry Pi CPU.
And we've known this for a while. You predicted it, we predicted it, and yet the market responded by selling off NVIDIA. So my question to you is, okay, you don't necessarily need these large language models. Let the big guys spend all that money, but don't you still need GPUs?
Look, I think if you look at the software cycle over the years, right? Even pick Microsoft operating system, even personal experience, you're like, I want a bigger, better laptop, with larger CPUs so I can do more things.
Yeah.
And so hardware, you'll always need a bigger CPU. There's no doubt about it. GPUs will play a part, NVIDIA will play a part. Yeah, the stock dip, but it, by the way, has regained a lot of it, right? Yeah. So, I mean, look, and their earnings was great as well.
Yeah.
So, look, hardware will always catch up to software, right? And there's no doubt that you'll need bigger compute power. But I think there is, what was forgotten in all of this talk is the idea of building smaller language models or just smaller AI models. Agentic AI, as an example, doesn't require big, huge, monolithic models anymore. You could just do it with a small 20 token model and be done with it.
And the other thing is, if any market is not a zero-sum game, it's this one. So it's not as though pick your vendor, whether it's AMD or AWS or Google or Microsoft, just because those guys are selling chips doesn't mean NVIDIA's not going to sell. They're all going to sell chips because there's different use cases. What are you seeing at the edge for that type of deployment, and where do you guys fit?
So we launched Edge AI as a product and service back in August. And we were telling the market.
We chatted back
then.
Yeah.
Right. And we said, look, we could do a lot of things on the edge. You don't need a big, massive GPU infrastructure, data center to power these AI models. You could do that in a small little edge box that sits right next to an X-ray machine, or a conveyor belt, or a airport locomotive, AGVs, warehouses. It needs to be there because it needs to take action right away. So what Edge AI is basically looking at time series data. As data is coming in, it does something with it, puts it in a nice model, and takes action. That's the benefit of an Edge AI model. And I'm oversimplifying it. I know my engineers are going to kill me.
You're not necessarily oversimplifying it though, just because you're not using a lot of acronyms and words and abandoning half of the audience who doesn't understand our lexicon. I think you're actually hitting the nail on the head, and I think what I like about what you're saying is you're essentially saying that this experience at the edge is going to be the way that most people interact with AI in a longer term value creation way, which I think is fascinating. You mentioned the supply chain example. I'm very curious what else you're seeing in terms of edge where the benefit is as obvious as it is with the 80% of the use cases there.
I'll give you a use case, and I think, Dave, we talked about this some time ago, and since then we've matured on this, this use case. Basically, take a big, large warehouse, and typically you'll find hundreds, if not thousands, of thermostats regulating the temperature of this huge space. Sometimes
I bet they're doing it in here.
Think about it, right?
No, literally, it's great, yeah.
And each section should have their thermostat so that you can be comfortable, right? But in these large warehouses, factories, there's literally a person with a laptop, much like your mixer there with, looks like a DJ. He's calibrating all the thermostats to get in standard ambient temperature of 70 degrees, making that up.
Yeah.
To do that, you have to regulate all these thermostats across the board. And literally this person is going from thermostat to thermostat, connecting to it and being able to get an ambient temperature of 70.
Crazy.
Now if you put that in an AI model, it takes all the data from these thermostats, understands it, and then regulates it. And you just say to your little little UI model, just say, hey, put the temperature to 70 degrees, it does the magic.
And it probably does it more efficiently.
More efficiently,
no doubt,
you don't
right?
need a person to do this,
Yeah.
but it does that effectively and immediately, which is key, versus somebody going to hundreds of them and trying to manage it individually.
Well, and you could probably, sorry, I know you got something to say,
That's
but
good.
and you could probably, I mean, I just think about this from a sustainability perspective. You know, if you sense, you could know that there aren't people in the room, for example, so it doesn't need to be a 70. It can go a little bit up and down, depending on the machines or whatever's in there.
Yeah, in this case, by the way, one of the goals was for lower carbon footprint, energy footprint, sustainable goals. That's why they wanted to have a consistent standard temperature.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, you were joking before, your engineers wouldn't like the way you described it, but you were actually talking tech, time series, that's streaming, that's data. You talked about action, taking action, that's agentic, everybody's talking about agentic. You're actually applying it in the real world, so I'm interested because there's a lot of agent washing going on, a lot of AI washing. You're talking about real use cases in the field. This is real revenue that you're generating for you guys and your customers. So where are we, what's the journey look like? How real is this today? How meaningful is it?
So Edge AI, in our view, is blue collar, meat and potatoes use case. Things that people want and need in real time. Yeah, I would love to have Google search replaced by my Perplexity browser, great. But you know what, I don't even know if I need it. Maybe I do, who knows? I can build my itinerary when I go back to Europe in summer, great. But this is stuff, these are use cases that could be used today in today's world. We do believe, we call them blue collar use cases, but they're basically industrial manufacturing use cases that they're critical, mission critical applications. So look, for me, it's important to solve today's problem using today's tools. And that's what AI and Edge AI does.
We did a study, it was over 10 years ago now. Actually, GE asked us to take a look at it. Remember when they were trying to sort of become a software company? And I remember our analyst who quantified this, he came to me, he's like, this thing is so big. He goes, it starts with a T, with a trillion. I mean, the market is massive, but of course it's very fragmented. Right, so how do you deal with that sort of fragmentation from a business model standpoint?
It's an awesome question because there's so many AI models out there today. It's kind of crazy. Like, you remember the old browser wars?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It feels like we're seeing this right now and play out. Look, for us, it was very important to pick the right AI framework, and the one we looked at was mathematical based. Not to get too technical, but a mathematical based model is different than a language based model, in that it can pivot very quickly to a variety of different use cases through mathematical permutations like linear programming models, not to get too confused.
No, it's good, linear programming, using matrix math.
Exactly,
yeah.
Thank you.
You can get nerdy with us,
Yes,
don't worry.
So absolutely, and that, using those constructs are easier to not only program, but also apply in these industrial use cases that require time series data. So back in the linear programming class that you probably took, it was all time series.
And they require very high degrees of accuracy.
100%.
They can't hallucinate,
Yes.
right? That's
and mathematical models do not hallucinate.
Exactly, they don't.
They're very discrete, it's discrete mathematics there.
yeah, you're either correct or you're not correct. I mean, that's what we learned back then, right? So, okay, so DeepSeek, good news, right?
I think so.
Okay. How about China, US? You hear a lot of talk. You guys are a global company. I hear people say, US must win the race for AI. Not even quite sure what that means anymore. I mean, China clearly is a player here. But you know the US innovation model very well. How do you think it's going to play out?
It's a loaded question, Dave. Always a good one from you. Look, I think the DeepSeek model proved two things. One, the economies of scale. I think Satya said it very eloquently, which is, look, it doesn't mean that you can, just because you have something, economics go down, doesn't mean the demand is not there.
Jevons paradox.
Exactly.
Right?
And so I think that's one outcome. The second one is that it's open source, which means you don't necessarily have to build a proprietary model. You can open source it. And by the way, yes, DeepSeek has all the data. If you have that app on your iPhone, which I do, all that data goes to China. Okay, we know the sensitivities there. But look, it's open source too. You can bring that data and make it your own. So it doesn't go to China. So there's a lot of nuances. People have to really understand the differences. It's not just necessarily, just because it's made in China doesn't mean it has all the political attachments. So I think there's going to be a lot of China versus US. I think to me what is more important is to discuss open versus proprietary models. And I think that's where, it's interesting that China would come up with an open source
Isn't
model.
it? And DeepSeek gets very high marks for
Yeah.
that. You know, it's also,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, IBM Granite, very open. Didn't have quite the performance advantages, although very competitive performance.
Yeah.
Just didn't get as much noise, you know, because it wasn't a Chinese company.
Right.
I'll give you my take. I wonder if you could comment on it. You're not going to stop China from innovating. No way. They're copying, innovating, whatever you want to call it, both. But the AI diffusion regulations, I don't know if you saw them.
Yeah.
They basically put countries into three buckets. You're with us, you're against us, or you're in the middle. And it's that in the middle, it's like India, Israel, Switzerland, and it's so convoluted that those guys aren't going to be able to get access. And that, to me, that's a mistake. That, speaking as an American, the United States should be welcoming those countries in, and as opposed to pushing them away, they could push them to China. And that, because my premise is you need an ecosystem to win in AI. And if you don't have those countries as part of your ecosystem, and China does, that's advantage for China. Your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, no, absolutely. I think the whole idea of sovereign AI kind of sucks, to be honest with you. I'm like, no, please don't bring politics into tech.
Yeah.
You know, let's leave that alone. I mean, DeepSeek proved it right on point that just because you're Chinese, it proved the whole economic transformation on AI. Reset our thinking. And so, hey, what's the next? It's not to say maybe somebody in France, who are, by the way, the best physicists and mathematicians in university-wise, they might come up with something very different.
I saw some benchmarks. DeepSeek, obviously competitive. You know, you had Llama in there, you had Anthropic in there, you had Google in there, et cetera. But the one company that is consistently innovating is OpenAI.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking large language models,
Yeah.
and I know you're a big fan of small language models because your space and your served market. But I want to ask you something that we often ask informed guests is, do you think that market gets commoditized, that LLM market? And some people would say it already is. But then there's OpenAI. They keep pushing the envelope, which is kind of interesting. John Furrier, whom you know, smart guy, says the key is going to be innovation as to whether it gets commoditized. I know a lot of VCs say we've seen this model before. It's 100% going to get commoditized. What do you think?
I agree. I think with Furrier, I think, look, it will have to consolidate at some point. Masa-san from SoftBank, you know, he's investing, you know, I don't want to use the expletive here, but a lot of money, right? And, you know, is there room for another model like that? I don't know. Frankly speaking, I think what we have is pretty good. I think there's some consolidation will have to happen. I like the way OpenAI is also focusing on business to business use cases. That's a good advancement, much like Microsoft is. That's going to drive a lot of innovation, a lot of different types of use cases, and ultimately we'll figure out whether there's a room for another model out there.
And it's great for you because it just trickles down. What Grok is doing, what Elon's doing with XAI, yeah, bring it on. If you want to spend all that money creating, you know, systems, open systems that we can then learn from, that's what's going to happen. One of our earlier guests today called it Doge for AI.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
which I thought was brilliant.
No, yeah, that was great in general. All right, Shahid, we could talk to you all day, but I have one final question for you. Since you're a CUBE alum, VIP here, what do you hope to be able to say when we're hanging out at Mobile World Congress in 2026 that you can't yet say today?
Awesome question. Well, to me, I think 2025 is going to be a pivotal year. Many of us know the political landscape is changing almost daily, if not weekly, right? So, I mean, I think, look, I think the tech cycle is also in full correlation with the political cycle that we're witnessing. The two things are almost identically revolving. So I think it'd be interesting to see the intersection of politics and tech that I don't think we've seen before.
Agree. Well, we've certainly never seen an inauguration with the executives of the largest social networks on the planet standing next to the President of the United States.
And the cabinet members were way back.
Right,
well,
yeah, exactly, in the nosebleeds.
And there's an asymmetry now in the media, where it was, everything was sustainability and DEI, that's been a big backlash, and so, we hope to fill that void.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're still going to be,
we'll
still be sustainable and care about DEI.
Yeah.
Shahid, thank you so much for this segment. This has been awesome.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Shahid, great to see you, man. Thank you.
It's great to see you too.
And thank you, Dave. Great questions on that one. That was awesome. And thank all of you for tuning in wherever you might be. We're here in Barcelona, Spain at MWC, coming to the end of day one. My name's Savannah Peterson. You're watching theCUBE, the leading source for enterprise tech news.